Good day, you're watching the news from Kazakhstan. I'm Askat Shariliyev, bringing you the top stories. Astana is awash with rumors of the arrest and subsequent stroke of the healthcare minister Jaksylik Doskaliyev. The political bloc Narodovlastia holds its oppositional congress, but the initiation of the referendum on the president's resignation is prevented due to the lack of quorum. Advisor to President Nazarbayev, Yermuhamed Yertezbayev, calls for the lifting of criminal prosecution for libel. The official says the change is not the authorities' public image campaign before the OSCE summit in Astana. A sensational criminal case is instigated in Astana against the healthcare minister Jaksylik Doskaliyev, who is charged with power abuse. At the same time, the chief physician appears to be in desperate need of medical care himself and is currently being treated in the intensive care. The press, meanwhile, builds assumptions that Doskaliyev fell the victim of the so-called intra-clan war. The next report has the details. The press service of the healthcare ministry reported on Monday that the country's chief physician is ill, although no reasons for the hospitalization were cited. It is, however, known that last Friday, Jaksylik Doskaliyev became the target of a criminal case instigated by the financial police. The Agency for the Counteraction of Economic Crimes and Corruption has opened a criminal case against the healthcare minister. We cannot disclose any other information in the interests of the investigation. Dr. Doskaliyev led the ministry for the last 2 years, and this is his second tenure on the position. Before his return, the official headed the Parliament's Committee on the Social and Cultural Development. The former colleagues cannot believe in the development and advise not to jump to conclusions. Mr. Doskaliyev used to be a committee chair in the Parliament before moving to the ministry. I believe he is a true professional, and I hope this issue will be resolved justly. It is a pity this had happened. He is very professional and is very knowledgeable in his field. I truly respect him very much. The instigation of a criminal case doesn't mean he is guilty of something. Only court can prove someone's guilt. For 2 years of Doskaliyev's term as a minister, he is constantly followed by scandals, the most famous of which is linked with the supply of medicine to children with leukemia. Hawa Goygova was one of those openly opposing the minister's policies, hence she is not very surprised about the news. Everything led to this, like the poor provision of medicine in cases of good drugs replaced with those of bad quality. Fish rots from the head indeed. The information portal Respublika published a letter from a visitor who shared his ideas about the political motivations of Doskaliyev's persecution. Supposedly, we are witnessing an attempt to discredit the minister by the so-called Southern Group in retaliation for the dismissal of their representative, the now ex-education minister Jansi Tuminbayev. One way or another, the criminal case is open, and there is a reason the lightning cannot be caught in a bottle. Agents of the National Security Committee intimidate family members of delegates who participated in the oppositional congress. The information was reported on Monday by the activists of the Communist Party branch in the Mangistau region of the country. The Congress of the political bloc Narodovlastia sought to initiate a referendum on the resignation of President Nazarbayev, and now its delegates are planning to launch a 3-day hunger strike to protest continuous threats from the authorities. The hunger strikers demand to protect their families. According to delegates, officers of the National Security Committee visited their homes after their departure from Mangistau to Almaty. Supposedly, they issued threats to those Congress delegates who were to speak poorly of the current authorities. Village resident of Uzen, Nursulu Utarbayeva, recalls that before her departure to the Congress, some unknown people attempted to break into her apartment. The head of the delegation, the first secretary of the Mangistau branch of the Communist Party, Nuria Shabdrimova, is outraged by the actions of the law enforcement agents. She says that in their intimidation methods, the officers of the National Security Committee even threatened physical harm to the delegates' children and close relatives. I was given a warning that I could end up in a car accident. I was also shown a bet, supposedly to indicate that I will be beaten. In any case, I still believe we should hold a referendum because Nazarbayev has to leave, because the living conditions of ordinary people are really bad. There will be no referendum to remove President Nazarbayev from the office for now.
The organizers of the oppositional congress, the political bloc Narodovlastia, failed to ensure a quorum of 600 people required for the initiation procedure. 115 delegates from various regions of the country never reached Almaty due to the pressure from the local authorities.
The opposition has failed to launch the mechanism to collect signatures for the removal of President Nazarbayev from the office. 115 delegates never reached the Congress dedicated to the matter. According to current legislation, the event would be recognized legitimate if every region of the country was represented by at least 30 people, and not less than 600 delegates in total. The organizers from the political bloc Narodovlastia say that the authorities prevented them to gather a quorum. People in the regions were intimidated and deceived by local officials, often using all possible means. Only about 10 people came from some regions like Atyrau, where the authorities were the most creative in their ways to prevent the delegates from attending the Congress. The quorum of 600 people is needed to initiate the procedure of collecting the 200,000 signatures, which will force the Central Elections Commission to hold a referendum on an important civil issue. In this case, it is the resignation of Nursultan Nazarbayev. I believe the referendum can drastically change the situation if it was held. Due to the lack of quorum, the delegates adopted an appeal to the heads of the OSCE member states and signed 3 resolutions on the freedom of political prisoners, on the freedom of assembly and peaceful protests, and on the return of Khan Kinissary. Please vote those in support of the resolution with the consideration to finalize the document by the drafting committee. During this Congress, the organizers began preparing for the second attempt to gather a sufficient number of people disaffected by the Kazakh president. Most likely, the next meeting will take place in spring because representatives of Narodovlastia are never giving public space for political events, and holding a Congress outside in winter is very highly unlikely.
Internet users expressed their support to Jamila Jakisheva at the recent online conference set up by the Radio Liberty Azatik. The wife of the imprisoned ex-head of the company Kazatomprom, sentenced by the authorities to 14 years, talked about the details of her husband's case and claimed another case is being fabricated at the moment.
Even behind the bars, Mukhtar Jakishev remains an uncomfortable figure for many people in the Kazakh political elite, said Jakishev's wife Jamila, answering questions of internet users during an online conference organized by the Radio Azatik. According to Jakisheva, someone at the top believes 14 years of imprisonment is insufficient punishment for her husband and tries to instigate another criminal case against him. Jakisheva is confident that this cruelty means her husband is still a serious obstacle for someone. The investigation, which is currently underway, deals with the same original case. Thus, the investigation is still open after already 2 years, and they cannot press charges on the issues that were originally put forward. Jakisheva says the trial over her husband was so absurd that the decent people in the country no longer trust the validity of the sentence. The second case will not fix the situation. They should have conducted a fair and open trial at the outset and proved Jakishev's guilt so that everyone in Kazakhstan could see that. It is obvious that this was not possible because Jakishev is innocent. Responding to the questions from users, Jamila Jakisheva emphasized that she is concerned about the health condition of her husband, which remains grave, while the prison administration still do not allow doctors to see him. In the past, during the trial, there was at least a paramedic or some doctor present, whereas during our last meeting, Mukhtar said that he has no medical supervision. He just takes the pills that I bring him. That is it. In March of this year, Mukhtar Jakishev was sentenced by the Sararka district court of Astana to 14 years of imprisonment on the charges of embezzlement of state assets. The trial was held in secrecy, and according to Jakishev's attorney Nurlan Besikiev, featured numerous violations.
The prosecution officials seek to introduce liability for the comments on the internet. In response, owners of Kazakh web portals say that the current internet legislation is already imperfect and includes numerous loopholes.
Who is responsible for internet comments? The legislation has yet to define the responsible for the content of comments left by the visitors of various websites. The issue was discussed at the thematic conference in Almaty. Representatives of the prosecutor's office in attendance confirmed the existence of a legal loophole. Last Saturday I read many comments on Zakon KZ that incited ethnic hatred. Those were later removed by moderators, but we copied some and sent them to the National Security Committee for the examination. The law doesn't define the time period over which the site administration must remove the undesired comments. Editor-in-chief of the internet portal Zona KZ Yuri Mizinov is confident that the owner is only responsible for the content of articles and not for comments. If they want to deal with the people who leave comments, I only support the initiative. Good luck to the prosecution office in this endeavor. Kaznet growth is constantly accompanied by scandals. For instance, the most visited forum in Kazakhstan, Center Tyarzhesti, or the Gravity Center, was blocked this spring by a court order. The case was already named the first raider attack in the Kaznet. The owner of the message board, Dmitry Zimin, says that it is better not to argue with the law enforcement. They come to you with specific resolutions saying that some legislation was violated and IP addresses of several users are needed. Of course, we have to comply. It looks like there's no other way to resolve the issue, at least until the law will make sure that the content provider is responsible only for the service and not for the creativity of the visitors.
Journalists should not be imprisoned for libel. The president's advisor Yermuhamed Yirtizbayev advocated the idea at Astana's international conference, the decriminalization of defamation, pros and cons.
Totally surprising to everyone, President's advisor Yermuhamed Yirtizbayev publicly advocated the introduction of liberal amendments to the legislation on libel and defamation during the recent international conference. When choosing a government without newspapers or newspapers without the government, I'll side with the latter. I believe a government with no press is dictatorship, authoritarianism, repression, and the complete lack of the civil society. I hope that this year will finally put an end to this issue. Kazakh journalists have been repeatedly subjected to administrative and criminal penalties for their professional activities. 25 people ended up under the court pressure over the past 2 years alone. One of them is the editor of the newspaper Almaty Info Ramazan Yezergepov, who was sentenced to 3 years for a critical article about the National Security Committee. Now the judges' union proposes to replace imprisonment with fines. The decriminalization could be implemented through the abolishment of articles in the criminal code and replacing them with administrative laws. Independent lawyers inclined to believe that criminal prosecution for defamation and libels has long become a tool to deal with undesirable journalists and is often used as punitive measure. Hence, the press is rather skeptic about the new liberal amendments. From time to time, the authorities come up with bills that talk about the decriminalization. However, nothing ever reaches its logical conclusion, and these bills disappear suddenly as they appear. Journalists themselves remain cautious about the initiative, seeing the statement of Yirtizbayev nicknamed the President's Nightingale as a nice PR move of the presidential administration on the eve of the OSCE summit in Astana. The advisor in his return says he will personally speak to the introduction of the bill before the event.